reviews, Nature. Paper is called Quantum Certification and Benchmarking, came out just a few days ago. Really impressive list of authors. What I love about the paper is that it's very pragmatic in spirit. As the title suggests, it speaks about certification and benchmarking. For quantum computing, one of the features of quantum computers is that we believe they are going to be more powerful than classical computers. That is fantastic, but it also becomes an issue because we have ideas, but one of the practical problems that we are going to face when quantum computers scale up is that it's going to be hard, or at least it's not going to be trivial to test the correctness of the computations that they are performing, right? Because you cannot use a classical computer to check if the computation is correct indeed because of, the whole issue and blessing of quantum advantage. And this is really what quantum certification tries to capture. How do you certify the correctness? How do you verify if a quantum computer is working as it should or not? Well, benchmarking says something more. It says something about the performances of the machine. So you could speak about gate benchmarking, or you should maybe look at you could start thinking, although it's a bit premature, maybe about benchmarking with respect to specific application of a quantum computer and so forth. So this is really, if you like, the difference in a nutshell. And what this paper does, which is great, so first of all, in this figure 1, I'm not sure if you can see it well. Let me zoom a little bit. They they list a number of techniques, and they plot them against assumptions and more or less information gain. So you can get a sense of you need less assumptions and you can gain more information, or vice versa. This figure doesn't say anything about the complexity of the techniques. So some of those are very hard to do in practice. It's just telling you something about the features of those techniques. But then if you go down, if you scroll to page 4, and this is great, for anyone who's looking at actually getting their hands dirty, there is a one-page table with a list of certification, characterization, and benchmarking protocols, which is very comprehensive. And furthermore, I think they did something which is very impressive. Scroll down to page 7, and I'll show you another page. They give you a link to an online certification library, which I'm going to open now here. They don't have a protocol for all of the techniques that they state in the paper, but some of them do. So for example, you could go and have a look at quantum gate set tomography. They speak about the assumptions, notation, Arduino requirements, etc. This is really great, right? So we are starting to see more comprehensive effort and really make sure that we understand how the machines are performing, that we have I would say, well-accepted, or a set of well-accepted methods to benchmark these quantum computers, which is something that I personally really love. So I hope people will find the paper as interesting as I did.
It is. So what do you think it takes? And I'm asking more about the approach rather than the metric to really assess the performance of a quantum computer. And in the beginning, it was all about qubits, right? Then IBM came up with the quantum volume. Now that Google and Honeywell are doing really well at quantum volume, IBM is talking about circuits. Today, actually, Japan announced a new supercomputer that's 2.8 times as powerful as the previous supercomputer. What does it take, you think, to really assess the performance?
This is a really good question. It's also very hard to answer. I can give my take. I would love to hear Rod's thoughts on this as well. So I think all the benchmarks, if you like quantum volume, number of qubits, these are all fair games. Quantum volume, I guess, is an okay one to move forward. Now Honeywell seems to be embracing it as the figure of merit. I don't know if it's nuanced enough to actually really tell the whole story. I personally don't believe it is, but that's fine. I think for now, though, we still have to really think in terms of different platforms and still make fair comparisons between the different machines. For example, Denise was speaking about the time that it takes to run a computation on a trap ion machine, and as far as I know, a quantum volume really doesn't capture that. But it's important for people to know that this is is a difference, for example, between the IBM machine and the Honeywell machine, or even the future Psi quantum machine. So the short answer to a difficult question is that there's a lot to say about benchmark, and I don't think we still have, and maybe we will never going to have a single, number, if you like, for that. Rod, do you have anything to add?
I don't have anything in particular on the choice of metric there, quantum volume versus other things. One of the things that we have used goes back to a paper by Andrew Steen, who's one of the key ion trap people historically, a paper of his from the 1990s, where he talked about what we call the KQ metric, where Q is the number of qubits you're using in your circuit, and K is the circuit depth, and you just multiply the two of them. It's actually related to IBM's quantum volume, but the calculation method's a little bit different. It's actually, in some ways, a little bit of a simpler metric, I think. So we've found that useful for talking about how complex an individual circuit or an individual problem is, and then the question is, how do you match that to a machine, and what is the probability you're actually going to succeed? Eventually, I think there will be a metric on the order of dollars per solution for a problem, and you'll be comparing quantum machines versus classical machines. But we are a very long ways from something like that. I do have a couple of other comments, though, on this. One, this paper has been floating around in draft form for, I guess, about a year. It was on the archive before it was actually published. I haven't looked at the published form, but it looks like it's actually grown quite a bit. But it's a fantastic paper. I completely agree. It's going to be one of the benchmark papers for a while, I would think. But there's one aspect that's actually slightly different for a case we care about a lot. Most quantum researchers are trying to figure out how to benchmark or evaluate systems as the size of the system grows. As we get to 50 qubits, 100 qubits, how are we going to characterize this system? We also do a lot of work on quantum internet, quantum repeater-based systems. And so we're doing a lot of design and evaluation work there. And what we care about for that is not how you're going to characterize entangled states with large numbers of qubits, but instead, how quickly can you characterize small quantum states with just a little bit of entanglement? Because in a quantum network, making entanglement between two places is actually an extremely expensive operation. So, for example, that paper, one of the tables you were scrolling by, talks about O of how many operations is it going to take to run a particular characterization benchmark. As an engineer, of course, I love that O of notation, but it also hides a constant factor. And for a lot of these algorithms you're talking about, that constant factor might be 3,000 or 5,000 or 9,000 or something in order to collect enough data to run the statistical measures that you're doing for calculating that. That's okay in a system in which you can get 5,000 or 9,000 shots in a few seconds of runtime on a particular quantum processor, but in a quantum network that generates 10 entangled states per second, 9,000 states for your characterization protocol is a long time. So that's one of the problems we're working on, and we've actually been talking to some of the authors of that paper about this particular problem.
A very complex topic, and as the business person and investor, customers moving into quantum computing, laymen like us, we obviously need some metric that we can hold on to that allows us to assess what folks are doing. So as long as we have nothing better than quantum volume or potentially circuits, I think that's a great metric for us to look at.